Hey everyone, we're back again for another episode of Lessons of the Woods by 10 Point Whitetails. I'm your host Dylan Porter, and with me we have our co-host, and hopefully the one of us that knows how to speak English properly, Kyle Weber. Man, I've been struggling these last couple podcasts. I don't know why. At the beginning of every one of them, I screw something up.
Do we have to have a script?
I have a script in my head.
Oh, no, we need printed right
No,
here.
if I read
I
something...
am Dylan Porter.
Exactly. I turn into a robot as soon as I start reading it. During this podcast, we're going to cover our previous hunts, but at the time you're listening to this, Kyle is somewhere in Montana chasing mule deer.
Yeah, we are going to do a pack, camp and hunt, camp and hunt words.
Neither of us can speak English.
In the middle of absolutely nowhere in Montana. We're going to go basically as north as Highway 2 goes, probably go an hour south. We're going to pack and camp. That's what I was trying to say.
There we go.
We're going to park the truck. We have a camp. We're going to have a camper on there. We're going to camp out of. And then we're going to travel X amount of miles, minutes down into the breaks, into the coulees with the side-by-side, and try to find us. Me and a buddy, Montana native, we are going to try to tag 2 decent mule deer. Me and him went 2 years ago, and I successfully shot a smaller 2-year-old muley. Very happy with it. Had a 4-point side, a 3-point side, actually a 5-point side and a 4-point side with the brow tines. Montana's weird with their points.
Mule deer people are weird with their points.
Yeah. But it was a very fun hunt. This time we're going full bore. We're going full camping, full on. I think it's 17 degrees there right now. Friday, it's going to be -10 for a low. So when you're watching this, think of me. I will either be basking in glory of shooting a nice mule deer or freezing my butt off and being not a happy camper. Stuck.
Hopefully it's frozen and not too much snow. But
they just got 3 feet somewhere out there.
Just don't get eaten by anything.
The weather depends on elevation.
Yeah.
So
that's what's happening right now as you listen to this. If you listen to it on the day it comes out.
Yes.
So we're going to cover our last hunts that we just had. We both have been successful with our bows this year. So Kyle harvested a buck that he called Ace, and I harvested a buck that Dad's had on camera a couple times out at my dad's place, but it's not the big one. There's a bigger one out there. And at this point, it's probably been shot by the time you listen to this. Hopefully by one of my group, but we'll find out because there's a lot of traffic on some of the area around us. So the buck that I harvested, he was a big 8-pointer. I was pretty happy with him. But the last time I shot a deer with my bow, and this is going to sound bad for the whitetail consulting guys, right? Last time I shot a buck with my bow was 17 years ago. I was 11 years old. So that's a very long time. And not to say I didn't bow hunt that much. I bow hunted from 11 to probably 19. Then I got married. My work changed. My life changed. It's not my wife's fault, but everything changed. I started guiding a lot of hunts. Kind of got burned out from hunting. Didn't have time to hunt in bow season. So I kind of gave up on it for a little bit. And then was able to go this year. First deer I've shot in a very long time with my bow. I love this bow. I've only shot 3 or 4 deer with this one since I bought it when I was 16. So, long time ago. But I gone out a few times this year, and I posted some of the recaps of the sits I've had. I haven't done a recap on the buck hunt yet. Still trying to figure out how I want to put all that together. But I've sat, and I'd see deer. Sat one night, saw 6 or 7 spike bucks, sat on a nice corn food plot. My dad's put a lot of work into his property, and that's where I'm going to draw some of my whitetail consulting experience and knowledge off of. He's got a good corn food plot. He's got some ponds out there, good stands, good rifle stands, which we're taking advantage of right now in this horribly windy yesterday deer hunt. But we got a lot of good stands out there. But in particular, we have one bow stand that has been the most successful stand for bow hunting we've ever had anywhere on the property. And my dad's got, what does he have for acreage right now? He's got probably 160 acres that we can hunt altogether. 2 separate parcels on the other opposite sides of the highway from each other. But then there's 2,000 acres of state land that we have access to. So we've hunted all this land. Dad's got a bunch of cameras up, revealed by Tacticam. If they don't sponsor us, they should, because we talk about them all the time. But everybody probably does at this point. So he's had this buck on camera a few times. We kind of knew the area was moving through. He's got a couple other bucks on camera. He's got another one that looks just like this. He actually had a picture of a picture of the buck that looks exactly like the one I shot the night I shot this one on the other side of the property. So it wasn't the same deer. So I was sitting in this stand. I sat at a couple different places. Didn't have really the luck I wanted. Had one stand where I barely saw anything. Didn't really like the sit. Saw an owl, which was really cool. But then I went and I'm like, I'm going to try this stand that's been so successful for us. We had a guy actually sit in it for a few days. He saw a bunch of deer, but nothing that he wanted to shoot. In this stand, when I was between 4 and 6 years old, this is the first stand Dad took me hunting in. And at that time, it was a 2-foot square of plywood. A couple 2-foot squares of plywood, but that's what the stand was. A 2-foot square of plywood with a homemade welded bar tied to the tree. They were solid stands. They worked really well. Dad made a bunch of them back in the day. But that's what the stand was, in this oak tree. And kind of in an oak grove, lots of hazelnut brush, some popple trees, and it was a natural travel corridor. It was in between my dad's deer fence and my neighbor's cattle pasture. It's about a 100-yard corridor. And deer always moving through there. First time Dad took me hunting, I actually have this hunt on film. He shot a little spike buck through there. I could pinpoint almost the exact spot the deer was standing when he shot to this day. Just tons of fun have been had there. My first buck I shot with my bow, I shot 150 yards south of this stand, wounded it, ran into the woods. So Dad went and sat in this stand, and we pushed the woods to him, and he finished off the buck. So this stand has a lot of good memories. Dad shot many deer there. I've hunted there many times. I think I've shot a couple of does out of that stand. All together in my family, we're guessing probably between 30 and 50 deer have been harvested out of that stand. It's just one of those, it's a good spot. So this year, that travel corridor is being used by a lot of does, and they move from one end of the property in the state land to across the road to a soybean field that just got harvested. So they're moving through there heavy traffic. And I knew things were starting to heat up. I'm like, I'm going to go sit in that stand again. I got to try it. And we put a ladder stand up, so it's not the 2-foot square of plywood. And there's no seat, 2-foot square of plywood. That's it. This is actually the second or third 2-foot square of plywood that's been set in that spot because it's just such a good stand. And I'm sitting there seeing deer come in. I'm like, okay, it's time to stand up. I had a spike buck come almost right underneath the tree. Could have shot him. And I'm like, okay, we're going to get something's going to come through here tonight. Felt pretty good about it. And I had a doe come in, and she almost busted me. I don't know if I moved or what she saw. Stand location is not as good as it used to be because we lost some of the brush behind it, so you can get silhouetted now. So she might have seen that. And then she left, and I could see off in the distance, I caught a glimpse of a antler at about 75 to 100 yards. And I'm like, oh boy, it's going to happen now. Trying to look through my phone, can't zoom in far enough to see anything. Look through my binoculars, I'm like, 1, 2, 3, 4. I see one side, 4 points. I'm like, okay, this is going to be good. He's a shooter if he comes over here, if he comes within range. And then I'm looking, and I have a weird thing with my eyes. If I look through binoculars for too long, I can't focus close at all. So I just can't use them that much. So I put the binoculars down, and I'm looking. I'm like, oh, I think there's 2 bucks. 2 of them. Like, this is going to be good. There's 2 of them. I don't know which one's bigger, but there's 2 of them. And suddenly there's a doe coming right in front of me down a trail. And I'm like, crap, she's going to bust me. I'm not ready. trying to get an eye on these bucks. I still got the binoculars around my neck, and I wasn't confident with shooting the bow with the binoculars around my neck. So I'm trying to take him off, set him down before she gets there. She comes, she stops right in the lane where I'd shoot, and I'm like, crap. She sees me, looking right at me. I'm like, this isn't good. And out of the corner of my eye, I see him coming. I'm like, son of a gun. He's the buck I want. He's a buck I want to shoot. He's a good-looking buck. Probably 120 Class 8 pointer. Haven't scored him yet. I'm like, shoot, she's gonna bust me. He's gonna leave, and that's the end of the story. And then I look, and he's got another doe coming kind of behind him on a separate trail, but they're all gonna meet and converge at one point. And this doe is still staring me down. I'm like, shoot. She's straight downwind of me, too. Straight downwind of me. 25 yards. Like, this is great. I don't know if she smells me or not, but she sees me. And the buck's coming. She starts feeling a little bit nervous. So she walks forward about 6 paces. Can't really see me anymore because the brush that's there. And he's coming right behind her. And I'm like, okay. He's got brush covering his face. Pull back the bow. And now he comes out from behind a tree. And I can just see enough of him to get a shot off. He doesn't see me yet. Full draw. Send the arrow. There's a doe 10 feet behind him. He takes off running. He runs forward, does a zigzag, runs back, and does a zigzag again and runs. I'm like, crap, he's ran way too much. He hasn't fallen. This is nerve-wracking. I felt like my shot was a little bit back. Like, this isn't good. And then I heard a crash. I'm like, okay, I think he's down. Took note of where he was last time I saw him, where I heard the crash. I felt pretty good about it, but as Kyle knows, I did a lot of texting because I was kind of nervous about it. But the doe that was behind him, she never moved. She stood there the whole time, watched him run away, and never left. Which we'll get into why my deer are different than your deer. My deer are weird. So anyway, long story short after that, Dad finally comes and gets me after dark. We walk out. I think he died right by this big dead tree about 75 yards away. Walk over there, find him laying there dead. Huge sigh of relief. I'm like, okay. It's been a long time, 17 years, I still got it. Shot was a little far back, but I double lunged him, didn't touch the guts. So I felt pretty good about that. Drug him out of there. 204 yards, or 204 pounds. We had to drag him 100 yards to get him to the four-wheeler trail. Dad and I are wiped. Get him back up into the yard. Got him, take care of him. Had him in coolers by the end of the night. So good times. Long time since I've done that, but happy I can still do it. So, looking forward to getting back out there more. I might come whack that little buck that you got on camera all night tonight, this December. Probably not that one.
Come on over.
I might have to come hunt with you this December yet.
Perfect. Maybe I'll have a bigger one.
Maybe. So that's my hunting story this year.
So you had a full-fledged buck fever.
Yep. I did take a little video of myself shaking, so we'll see if that's worth posting.
You had to... it's amazing the emotions that come through in a tree stand. And so many people don't know. My wife particularly doesn't understand that moment. But, you play that picture of this deer happen. Everything happened so fast.
Mm-hmm.
How much did you look at the antlers?
I had a clear view of them for about 5 to 10 seconds. And I knew it was a big enough frame. I'm like, that's a shooter. Yeah. So when I went out there, I said to myself, it's been so long. If it's 2-year-old or bigger with a bow, I'm shooting it. Because the first buck I ever shot with my bow, the only buck I've shot with my bow prior to this was a yearling buck that was about like that. Little spike, or not a spike buck, but he was about an 8 to 10 point yearling. I actually have a full head mount of him at my parents' place still. I need to bring that over here yet. Head and shoulder mount. Nice buck. But that's the only buck I've shot with my bow up to this point. So I wanted to shoot a buck with my bow bigger than that so I can get it out of the way and feel comfortable going after those bigger 140, 150, 170 class deer if I can find them. Granted, as much pressure as we get up here, that's hard to do. But I saw him for just long enough to know he's a shooter.
But you talk about like that moment and everything happening so fast, and when you're target practicing and you're sitting in the tree stand and nothing's happening, you kind of like you hyper focus on that happening. So finally, once you're in full draw, you shoot. Your adrenaline is high. You're shaking. You're also sitting there, and you have to sit there, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
think about: did I hit him far back? How did I feel? Did I anchor? Points, nose, cheek? Did I
Mm-hmm.
line it? All this stuff. And you were texting me. You're like, shot a buck, but I'm not sure. He zigzagged. He ran too far. You're second guessing everything.
Mm-hmm. It
Meanwhile, shaking in a tree stand.
it's
Um,
amazing how much regret. Not that you shot at a deer. There's no regret for that. How much regret you feel after taking the shot when you have enough time to overthink it and think, did I do it right? I
yeah,
didn't see him go down. Did it happen the way it's supposed to? And like I said, not regret for shooting a deer. But if you wounded it, if you didn't complete the harvest properly, that feeling comes so fast if you don't see it fall. So I struggled with that a little bit out there, but it's been a while. And my confidence wasn't where it should have been because it's been so long since I've harvested deer with my bow.
yeah. And hunting and having a successful hunt it's such an emotional roller coaster. It's the lows, it's the anticipation of going to sit that night that
Mm-hmm.
goes up. There's the I didn't see anything low. The next day the anticipation the weather's right, it goes up. Then of course didn't see the right deer, you go low. You shoot the deer up. Did I
Mm-hmm.
shoot it back? Did I hurt, injure? Did I wound it? Did I make a good shot? Should I wait another second? Was he quartered towards? Was he quartered back? So you're down.
Mm-hmm.
You walk and you're trying to find the blood, and there's no blood or limited blood. And then you walk up on him. Boom! Now you're high, and then you get to share that moment with your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And all the years of that's just another memory on that tree stand. Another memory with you and your dad. And I'm sure when you guys hung it up, you were giggling, laughing, happy. I seen the video your dad posted. I mean, that's why we hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you missed a lot, but you also, as a carpenter, I don't want to come home and build if I built all day. You were
No.
hunting and guiding
Mm-hmm.
at the deer farm. You don't want to go hunt, especially when you're looking at 300-inch deer, 200-inch deer, and then you got to go be satisfied with an 8-pointer.
Yeah.
Anyways, but it's not your fault. But once you're a hunter, once you become a hunter, once you have that emotional roller coaster and that adrenaline rush and buck fever and then the success of shooting and harvesting an animal, it doesn't go away. Whether you're 17 years past it or haven't done it for 17 years, whatever it is, it's still there. And yeah, accuracy and mechanics and skill set needs to be
Mm-hmm.
worked on. But you successfully harvested an animal. You sat, you put the time in, you harvested an animal, and you're going to eat great because of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we already fried up one of the back straps. That was phenomenal.
I'm good. That's very good. I'm super proud of the fact that we've started 10-point whitetails, and that has scratched the itch of deer hunting. Because I think you've always enjoyed deer hunting. I think you've been very passionate for deer hunting, raising deer, all
Yeah.
of that. But I think it wore out. I think it wore on you in ways. So to see you excited to go back out and be rewarded with a successful hunt. I know when you text me and said BBD, big buck down, just shot a buck. Like I was just excited on this end for you
Mm-hmm.
because I know what you had to put into it and that it's been so long since you successfully got to go through a hunting season and tag out. So there's things to work on, I'm sure, but I'm just glad you got to enjoy that and get the shakes and get
Yeah.
the adrenaline because that's
Oh.
what I live for. So,
Absolutely. And I still have a doe tag to fill this year, and I'm not done hunting by any stretch of the imagination this year, but getting that out of the way, it's not really the right way to say it because out of the way has negative connotations, but getting it done and
Yep.
knowing I still can do it
Yep.
did me a lot of good, and I'm excited to get out there next year, put more effort in. Not that I didn't put much effort in, but put more effort in, help Dad with more of the food plots and everything on the property. And
Yep.
just,
and enjoy it.
I think I'm going to have to get myself a couple of tactical cams too. And see if we can't
Maybe
find...
they'll,
Huh?
maybe they'll sponsor us
Maybe.
and give us some. Huh?
There we go.
Tacticam, if you're watching this,
We know you
I
are.
got 4. I got 4. How many can a person have? 8, 10?
I think Dad's got 5.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean,
So-
that's quite... Tacticam, we've spent some money.
Yep.
Send it our way. But there's big bucks. There's potential for big bucks on my dad's piece because of the deer numbers we have. But the pressure gets to it. The hunting pressure. I didn't do the video. I should have. But I was going to actually drive Saturday morning from my place to Dad's place, which is kind of the 2,000 acres is kind of sandwiched in between us, and just go every quarter mile. There's orange. There's orange. There's orange. There's orange. There's orange. It's every quarter mile on both sides of the road. Should have done it. I know one guy who hunts just part of this 2,000 acres. They have a cabin. They had between 7 and 10 vehicles in their yard opening morning. So it adds up. But get out there with the bow. Got it first. Feel pretty good about it. Now we got to talk about Ace.
My love-hate relationship with Ace. Oh boy, where do we start? Ace, I'm weird like this. Dylan goes out, has a good time, harvests an animal, has a great time. I name them. I have a love-hate relationship with deer. We did all this work to wit's end, and it all that was dependent on shooting a good animal this year. My goals were to harvest an animal each year, preferably a buck, and every year that buck gets bigger. So that includes age class, but antler size is the general comparison. I shot a small 8-pointer last year that was a little wide. He had a strong side and a generally weak side. My goal was something bigger than that. And I was going to hold out till something bigger than that. I think it was July, and I'll have to go back and look through, but it was beginning of July, mid-July, and I got the first trail cam picture of Ace. And he was in a batcher group about 6. There was Ace. He was an 8, different kind of shaped 8-pointer that was kind of more high and tall. But then he had 2 little nubs right in between his brows and his pedicle, his base. There was 2 little nubs that went straight out. I named him Brutus. He was a substantially bigger body deer, but his antlers weren't as impressive. Anyways, I watched them deer all year. To a point, I could watch them with the Tacticams. We're going to keep pumping Tacticam. I could watch them rotate through the property on a daily basis. If I had morning pictures of them on this food plot, I knew they were bedded on the left, on the east side. If they were on this food plot, I knew they were bedded on the right. That night, they'd come out from the right. I mean, I had them patterned down to anything, to the minute that they were coming in to the spatula group. And I told a couple people, if they keep this pattern, I'm going to shoot them opening day. That didn't happen. The moment they got hard-horned, Brutus left, bailed out of Dodge. Ace stuck around, and a couple of other little ones stuck around. But what I learned or noticed with Ace, based on the cameras, is he was a very passive deer. He may be the first one to come up into the camera view, but the moment another buck walked into that camera view, he bailed off, and he was always in the outskirts of the pictures. Very passive, very even if I had a block out there for some time, domain, stockpile block, Ace would come in and put his nose down, but the moment another buck pushed him out of there, he was out. Very passive animal. And we all know that deer have personalities, and they can be hunted based on that personality. Anyways, they went hard horned. They kind of disappeared for a couple days. Ace showed back up. Boom, he's hard horned. 3 days later, I was like, there he is. From that point on, I think the total was he came in 6 times for the year. All the times that he came in, the wind was directly out of the east going towards the west, or from the south going towards the north. And he always came in, and I'm going to say a time, but obviously that changed. It was 6 o'clock. If it was dark if sunset was 7:06, he came in at 6. If it was dark at 6:06, he came in at 5. He was about an hour ahead of sunset. Anyways, I watched him. I woke up one day. I suffer with a migraine thing. I woke up one Saturday and had a really bad migraine. I laid around the house all day. Didn't do anything. About 2 o'clock comes. The pills kicked in. Migraine was going away. And I was like, oh, weather, this be a good day to go sit. But I figured my wife would divorce me if I laid around and was lazy all day. It got better
At hunting
by the
time.
time I went to
Yep.
go hunting. I stayed home. Ace came in an hour before dark, sunset.
Hmm.
Took pictures of him, or the camera had pictures of him, whatever. That was a recurring thing, but I thought it was good. He was coming in, he was having a good experience in the food plot. All the food, there's no chance of me spooking him. There's no scent from me. I haven't been in there all week.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, it was the weekend before. So Ace had a good experience at the food plot. That's all I'm asking for. And he did like probably 3 more times that same situation of coming in and having good experiences. Nothing can spook him out. He always came by himself. He never had other deer with him. The nights he would come in, there'd be does early,
Mm-hmm.
but then like once he walked in there was nothing. Does would bail out of there, and there was nothing the rest of the night. Something about him. I do believe it was a very passive deer, but something about him made all the deer get away from him.
Yep.
Anyways, fast forward. He came in twice, I think, at night, but that was a very like when he came in, it was daylight.
Yep.
So when we got pictures of him, which was very few and far between, but it was daylight, evening opportunities. It was never morning.
Mm-hmm.
I never sat mornings. Anyways, we fast forward to, I don't remember the date now. Oh, of course I remember the date. It is October 28th. Had a headache that morning. I'm going to go sit. Everything seemed right for Ace to come in.
Mm-hmm.
Weather was right. We had a south wind, which is horrible for me in the Titan blind. But I trust my scent control. I trust that my stuff hangs outside. I travel in my bare minimum. I put my clothes on outside the truck. I trust my method of scent control. I'm in a Titan blind, so the wind's not going to blow through me and off into the food plot, but I had a south wind. Anyways, I'm like, tonight feels like the night for Ace. Out of all the other cameras, I was not catching them anywhere else. It was purely the big food plot. My camera would always get his butt first. So I always knew he was coming from what would be from the Titan blind, my left side in.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's left out there, and he wants a east to west wind or a south wind because I'm sure that's giving him the advantage coming to the food plot.
Mm-hmm.
What he did every other day, I have no idea, but it wasn't for me. So I'm getting ready. I looked at my wife. I said, I'm going to kill him tonight. She's like, you don't know that. I said, 6 times he's come in. He's followed the wind. The wind's got the this direction. The weather's the right way. The pressure's coming in. The cold front's here. He's going to be in the big food plot an hour before dark.
Mm-hmm.
Before sunset. I just felt good about it. Meanwhile, this whole process, I've been self-filming. I'm trying to get used to a camera. I'm trying to get used to being in front of a camera, having dialogue, all of this stuff. So I've been self-filming intros and outros, and I've bantered on the camera. Dylan's going to have to listen to all that whininess I've had. Anyways, I pull up in my truck. It's October 28th. And I had to sit October 28th no matter what was going on. And maybe that was the deciding factor for the wind, because the wind was bad. October 28th, the year before, I shot my 8-pointer on my first sit of the year and my first sit on that property. October 28th, and I shot that deer. 4 hours into the hunting season, I shot an 8-pointer. Now it's October 28th. I had to sit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the day.
It's the day.
So I pull up with the truck, put the camera out. I do a little intro there, and I'm like, the wind's wrong, but I trust my scent. It's October 28th. A year ago today, I shot an 8-pointer. Everything else seems to be like the stars are aligning. Tonight, I think, is the night.
Mm-hmm.
I hike up in, access Titan, the Titan blind. I sit down. We're hanging out. I do a little intro at the camera. What I do is I open the main window and I get the camera kind of middle of the food plot so that, for example, something's really going crazy happening. I don't have to try to mess with this camera.
Mm-hmm.
Never self-filmed before in my life, but we're doing this, all right?
Yeah.
A couple does walk in with a fawn, and I got all this on footage, but she's wandering around there eating. Everything's good with that. I'm trying to record her, or maybe it was the fawns. My camera goes, card A is full. Switch to card B. I don't know how to do that on my camera. There's 2 card slots, but I don't know how to switch.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it naturally did that. So I have to open the thing up, take B out, take A out, put A in B, and then put B in A. And start it, and it worked, right? So I manually switched them. Anyways, I make sure that's filming okay, we're good. It's 20 to 6, and I think dusk was like, shooting hour was like 6:17 or 6:18. It's like 16 minutes after sunset, whatever the DNR thing was. It's like 20 to 6. And the does have been in for a while, and I always watch the does on how they're, if they all pick their head up and look to the right, something's going on to the right.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to hear a deer coming a lot earlier than I will.
Yep.
So I always watch that activity and watch their tail, and, you know, at one point, again, wind is over my shoulders, which is in a Titan blind, but goes over the Titan blind right onto the field. And right over the food plot. She's looking. You can tell she's trying. She's like, I don't like that. You know, what's going on? And at one point, she kind of bails out. And she doesn't run. Tail's not up, nothing. But she leaves. I'm like, oh, she figured something was wrong and got out of there. 5 minutes later, she walks back out. Okay, she's comfortable. They're mingling. No big deal. But all of a sudden, I hear this. She doesn't make a meh sound. She doesn't bleat. She doesn't grunt. She makes a noise. And she's one of the closest deer to me, and she takes off. Camera's off at this point, right? Because I'm just sitting here hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
She takes off, head straight down, and I'm like, what is going? Head's really low, and her legs are really low, and she's checking out of dodge. And I'm like, what's going on? And I'm sitting way back in the Titan. And I lean kind of forward. I look out the one corner window. Boom. There's Ace. And he all but running up the food plot to right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
She's out of here. I'm doing this like, here he is. Like, boom. He just dropped from a portal right on the food plot. Bow's in my hand. I reach up, flip on the camera, hit the record because I got the remote, and it's on him, but I zoom in just a little bit, and he like runs a little forward, and there's an apple there that I got from the apple tree, and he like steps back and starts chewing on it. I draw back, and I got Luminox on, and I did that so that the footage can help.
Mm-hmm.
You know, watching the footage, we can watch where it goes. What you'll watch in the slow-mo that I'm sure Dylan will edit to slow-mo, his head's up and he's like chewing on this apple, and all of a sudden his head goes down, and I release the arrow, and you see this arrow flying through the air, 320 feet per second, not the crazy fast bows, but relatively fast. You can see this arrow is 15 feet from him. It's a 25-yard shot, chip shot. And he hasn't moved yet, but that knock comes in slow-mo, and he gets about 15 feet away from him, and then you see him drop his shoulders, and he loads up to get out of dodge. I don't know if that means he saw the knock, he heard the bow. I don't know what triggered it, but it was...
I would say heard more likely than saw.
Sure. But, I mean, we're talking 15 feet, so that should be 1/16th of a second, or what I mean... And what you watch is he drops, he loads up those shoulders and turns. Luckily, everything he did, it did help my arrow. Buck fever, camera, everything's going. It's utter chaos in the blind. You watch the impact. So I whack, shoot him. He falls on his butt, turns around and hauls out of there. And I just reach up and I hit the camera to look out towards the left where he was bailing off to, which is where he came from. And you can see in the video, I get just a scotch of his butt, but that's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
But we talk about that moment of high, low, adrenaline, all that, buck fever. I flipped the camera on and I got the most raw reaction of mine. Like, it worked. I'm just as shocked as anybody else that he came in. I called it. Tonight's the night. He's going to come from the left. He's going to stand there. I'm going to shoot him. Everything, accumulation, happened. So we get a really good raw moment of me reacting to that. And I'm like, I knocked him on his butt. It smoked him. So I sat there for a while, text Dylan, text Corky, text a few people, text my wife. And I rewatched the footage. And after you watch it a couple times, and especially in slow-mo, you see the arrow went pretty far back.
Mm-hmm.
And I got out, walked around to the food plot where the shot was. Couldn't find any blood, but I did see my arrow partially off the food plot, like on the food plot, but towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
I grab it, look at it, where we got good blood, dark blood, but not a good blood trail. So now I'm backing up. We're gonna get out of here. And I purposely leave my knife and my flashlight at home. So no matter what, I have to drive home, even if the deer is dead in the food plot. I have to drive home to grab those things. So it at least gives them 30 minutes because everybody's excited to go look.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants to get his hands on it, So it's a way for me to control. They're at least going to get 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Expire. Anyways, I talked to Corky and I stopped by his house and we look at the arrow and watched the footage. And I talked to you, sent the footage. And, I even talked to my brother, and everybody kind of agreed it's pretty far back. Let him lay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh.
Worst thing ever to do. I mean, not to do, but worst thing from an emotional standpoint to do.
Hardest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta say thank you to my brother. My brother's like, I'll be down there at 7 o'clock at daybreak. We'll go look for it. He didn't have to come. I can track a deer.
Mm-hmm.
But he made me feel obligated to wait for him.
Yeah.
And at 10:30 at night, I was like, everybody's like 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. Well, that put me at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. You can't see stuff at night, even with a flashlight. It's hard. It's like, well, if I'm going to go at 2, I might as well wait till 7. My brother made me feel obligated to wait for him, and I really appreciate that because I would have went out there middle of the night looking for my deer. I didn't get much sleep.
Of course.
I was very upset.
Yeah.
That moment, we talk about second guessing, and maybe I should have waited. Why'd I rush? Why'd I wait? Forget the camera. Do take the shot. Harvest it to me is more important than the footage.
Mm-hmm.
But we got enough footage. So you second guess every moment, and you wonder what you should have done different. 7 o'clock comes. I'm up, ready to go. Meet my brother. We go out and look. Find where the arrow was. Go to where we found some blood. It's pretty hard to find some blood.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know what's going on, but it is what it is. So I go and do kind of like a 50-yard circle. I maybe went 100 yards out, and then I took a left, and then was returning back to where my brother and my boy Flynn was with me. My niece Taylor was with me, and my nephew Riker was with me. So I had the whole crew for my deer. Which everybody got up early. My brother got 2 kids up to come help me. I mean, talk about
commitment.
His commitment to helping me with that moment. And he's actually the one that got me into bow hunting. But as I'm returning back about 40 yards back, so when 100 out, about 40 yards back, I look over. There he is. Laying there. Mm-hmm. Expired. Beautiful. Walk up to him. Unfortunately, some coyotes must have got to him. Some of the rear end and whatnot were chewed on. So go back, get my brother. We get him. We drag him back. We get him out of there. He's a great deer. I'm very happy with him. It was to go the whole first progression of the year. First day I seen him, I was like, that's that deer I want. And then to pattern him, to condition the situation, to know where he's at, and to basically call my shot, my game-winning shot. I'm Michael Jordan on the court. Like, I know what's happening, and to make it happen. The harvest wasn't, wrapping your antlers, hands around the antlers that night. That moment wasn't quite there,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day, it was still a success, similar to what you had. Um,
It's a whole different level of satisfaction when you've done all the work that you've done to get to this point. You took a property that had nothing on it, you modified it, changed it, got it to where it needed to be, got the trail cameras out there, got the buck, saw him on camera, and then harvested the buck. So that's a whole different level of satisfaction than, if you just go shoot a deer. So for you to be able to have that is, I feel like it adds to the whole experience, right?
It is. It's. This was my target buck. I brought machines in. I sweat, lots of time and money into the property, and he is everything I wanted. He is a harvest every year. He's bigger than last year's,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's the standard for next year.
Mm-hmm.
Next year's the land's got to produce something bigger than him, and every year the step gets bigger. And when I'm shooting 4.5, 5.5-year-old deer, and they're 150 inches every year, maybe we quit trying to top ourselves. And at 200, it gets hard.
Yeah.
But yes, it's all of the work that went into it, and it's just the beginning, and it worked so well the first year.
Mm-hmm.
How can you complain about that? I did a little inspection of my shot. My shot actually wasn't as bad as maybe the camera showed. It was far back, 100%. No, it was not a double lung. It was not a heart shot. It was none of that. But it wasn't as bad as we thought. Like I said, everything he did to load up and turn to jump the string actually helped me.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up going through, hitting back of the lung, smoking the liver, but then it deflected off of the rib and came out kind of in his lower hip.
Okay.
We'll call it the armpit of his rear leg, and that was the exit wound there. But it went all the way through him. The fletching must have hung on until I got to the edge of the food plot. That's why he stumbles in the shot. He falls down because, he got gashed open on that side.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at that shot, knowing partial lung and all of liver, he expired, I have to imagine, before I got out of the tree stand.
Yeah.
He was 60 yards away. He was full spread out. He wasn't bedded down. He didn't pass away. He didn't expire that way. He was done. But it comes full circle. Now we have a new standard for next year. The process worked.
Yeah.
He was bedding where I made bedding. He ate where I made a food plot, and he lived. He was a resident buck on my property.
Mm-hmm.
I posted a picture on the 10-point whitetails, and a gentleman commented and goes, "Congratulations. That's a great buck for northern Wisconsin. But I have to ask, you preach shooting 5-year-olds. How come you shot this one and we all agree that's probably a 2-year-old buck."
Yep. I'd say both the bucks we harvested were 2.
Yeah. He goes, "Why'd you shoot the 2-year-old when you preach 5-year-olds?" And I just want to be clear. My goals is the biggest resident buck on my property. Right now with rut, who knows what could walk through. But I don't want to get lucky and just because I was sitting there. I want to strategically harvest and focus on one animal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the largest resident buck on my property. I still want to harvest every year. I want to enjoy that moment every year. I don't want to go 10 years without shooting anything. And then it needs to be bigger than last year's. Ace hit all of those. He's not a 5-year-old. The most important thing for 5-year-old buck is what? 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about a residential buck, you need 5 years to get a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
We got two 2-year-olds that are going to make it till 3. They both should have substantial antler growth, be better than Ace. And the process starts that way. But it takes years to get a 5-year-old. I'm not going to
They don't
make
just
property.
appear, yeah.
The only luck you can have is if you make a great property, which I think we've done, and a 5-year-old comes walking through during the rut and goes, "This place is sweet. Look at all the ladies, all the food, all the bedding. I'm going to hang out." Then you can create a resident buck 5 years old, less than 5 years. But that's such a fluke.
Yeah.
And lucky. So to that person wondering why I shot a 2-year-old, because he hit my goals. And one of our 10 points is goals. And you have to answer, what are your goals for your property?
Mm-hmm.
Next year, my goals will be a little different. Still harvest an animal, still harvest the biggest buck that's a resident, and
Mm-hmm.
then, of course, it has to be bigger than Ace. If the land doesn't provide that, maybe I don't harvest an animal off that next year. Got other options, but
Yep. And it's okay
you
to not
can't.
harvest an animal off that property because there is state land and different places to go with it.
Yep.
Couple interesting points I want to make real quick, and then I think we got to start wrapping it up. Uh, I didn't think about it till you were saying you shot your buck with a south wind. The buck that I shot was also a south wind, which is odd because we don't get a lot of south winds up here. I don't know if it affected anything, but I went to where I sat knowing full well that my scent would be blowing directly where I planned on the deer coming from. So there's a lot to be said about both of our scent control seems to be working, and I think we should do a fun video on that at some point.
Sure.
Because there's definitely methods to that. Absolutely.
Yep. And I think there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of marketing and a lot of industrial,
commercial stuff out there.
A lot of stuff getting pushed down your throat that maybe is
not quite right.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the reason the south wind and the east to west wind, he came my way because he found a bedding spot on my left, on my west side, that he liked. He's always going to come in with a quartering wind or a straight on wind. They're not going to go with the wind at their butt. They want to know what they're walking into, and they rely on that nose to inform them before they get there. They want to check the food plot. They want to check the field first, most of the time. So he only came out when the wind was in his favor. When it was a west wind or a north wind, he probably went somewhere else. And that's okay. I prefer that he stays on the property. But there's nothing for a long ways. So obviously when he kept coming in, it showed that he was comfortable in a residential buck on my property. Those are patterns you have to pay attention to. I was never going to shoot him on a northwest wind.
Yeah.
Or a northeast wind. It wouldn't get him. Should you always hunt a south wind when it's going into the food plot? No. I wouldn't have sat in a hang-on tree stand that wind where I'm exposed to the weather and exposed to the wind. Absolutely not. But in my Titan blind, I was controlled and had all the windows are shut, so there's no wind to blow out there. And that definitely did help. And I did know he can come from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock. If he got to noon or 1 o'clock where the does were, he probably could have busted me because that's the wind direction. But I knew if I had to about 11 o'clock to get a shot opportunity before he worked his way through. But those patterns, them conditions, the weather pattern, tree stand location, my access, I never walked by where he was. The food we provided for him, that was super important. He got very comfy all summer, eating good food. My food plot is destroyed. There is not a lick of food nutrition on that thing anymore. It is toast. Something I have to deal with next year, whether it's bigger or different food. But them deer have absolutely hammered it. So he enjoyed many 6 experiences after being hard-horned that food plot was safe. He never got bothered, never got scared. Nothing happened. And I didn't overhunt the property. I didn't create a bunch of pressure. I didn't risk bumping the other deer. Just smart. Just being smart about it, following our 10 points. Killed Ace. I think it killed your buck. You haven't quite done the whole configuring that I've done on my property.
Not quite.
That also shows that you don't have to build food plots and set up box blinds to harvest animal.
You have to know your property.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so in my situation, we've had, Dad bought the property in 92. So he's been hunting it since 92. He knew there was a travel corridor there, so we've always had a stand there. And that's something that comes with time of owning the property, knowing the property, learning the property. So one thing I want to point out, too, is the difference in our deer herds. So I'm in northwest Minnesota, you're in northwest Wisconsin. And how long did it take before you had deer on your food plot again after you shot Ace?
So I shot Ace with 2 does and 2 fawns on food plot. When I shot him, they bailed and got out of Dodge. It took 4 days to see another picture of a deer on the food plot.
And that's just crazy because I think it has to have something to do with deer numbers. So your deer population will easily say significantly lower than the area where I hunt right now.
Yeah.
Without going into too much detail. But where I hunt, so I made a comment that there was a doe standing 10 feet behind the buck I harvested. She stayed there, watched him leave, then continued on her way. The second buck that I saw with the buck I shot, he came in 3-4 minutes later, and he stopped right where I harvested my buck and stood there. And I took a picture of him with my cell phone at 25 yards. And he's just standing there looking at me, looking at the base of my tree, looking around. Yearling buck, decent looking guy. But there's so many deer in northwest Minnesota right now. The numbers are finally back to where they were when I first started hunting. Where I think it makes them feel more comfortable because there's so many of them. They're like, we're fine. There's so many of us. Even though Saturday night of rifle season, I shot my buck Wednesday, rifle season started on Saturday, and I was out in my tree stand rifle hunting. Timberwolves lit up within a half mile of where I was sitting, just loud in the dark. But I think deer numbers, there's safety in numbers, and there's so many deer, they're like, it's fine. Everything's fine. Where you're at and the deer numbers are lower, and you still have wolves, they're like, oh crap, something happened, we're not safe anymore, this is bad, we're leaving. So you got to know your deer population too, and make your extraction safe to avoid bumping deer off your property.
Because it's exactly that. You can bump them getting in, you can bump them getting out. A doe can bust you, blow, and wave her tail, and you could ruin that spot for weeks because of that. My deer, the same does and same fawns that I've dealt with, the same little bucks. I mean, if I said there was a dozen deer on my property that are resident deer, I probably am not crazy. 12. 94 acres, 12.
Yeah.
And if I went to the neighbor's property, it's probably the same deer. If I went over to the right a half mile, it's probably the same deer. So we're talking 450 acre area that probably have that 450 acres that probably gets, including me owning 94 of it, 10 to 12 hunters hunting the same 12 residential deer.
Yeah. And that's a lot of pressure on your herd. And up here, I did a brief poll Sunday morning of hunters that were within about a half hour of where I was hunting. And they all had the same thing to say. They all said, yep, we're seeing lots of deer. We'll see 10 deer, we'll see 20 deer, we'll see 30 deer, a sit. And every one of them also said, yeah, for every 10 does we see, there's one buck with antlers. Every one of them. So that means, yeah, we got lots of deer. We don't have any bucks. And we get a lot of traffic from the Twin Cities. Like I said, I was going to do that video every quarter mile. There's somebody hunting, but there's a lot of state land, and they can come hunt the state land. But I think there needs to be done something from management down. And I'm saying DNR. We're not getting into that right now, but from the DNR down, we got to do something better to manage our deer herd in this area.
So you have a high doe to buck ratio.
Yep.
Lots of does, minimal bucks, and those bucks are young in age, in their age class. I'm saying we have crappy population, and that's very spotty. Depending on where you go, you can have higher density. Usually ag creates more density, but where I'm at, very low density. But I would say our buck to doe ratio is pretty good. And I'm excluding fawns, whether they're a doe fawn or a buck fawn, I'm excluding them. I'm talking mature does and antlered bucks that you can see. Preferably not a spike, but I'm talking forks, 6s, 8s, and beyond. We're probably 1-to-1, pretty close to 1-to-1, which is good. But when we're talking 12 to 15 hunters on 450 acres hunting the same 12 to let's call it 20 deer. Those deer are running in between these corn piles, these hunters. It's utter chaos and disaster. When something happens, they check out. They are not hanging out. Absolutely not interested. That's what. So we talk about a management thing. We talk about deer management, real quick. I can't afford to harvest $4 off my property.
Yeah.
I can't have my brother. I can't have Flynn. I can't do gun hunting. That's why I'm going mule deer hunting during gun season in Wisconsin, because I don't want to have the itch to go gun hunt on my property because I can't afford to shoot another buck.
Mm-hmm.
If I shoot another 2-year-old, that's one less 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Let alone all the hunters around me. So if we can be upset with deer management and tags and all whatever, whoever's in charge of all of that world.
Just because they sell you a tag, you don't have to use it or fill it.
But you have to be conscious of your property, what you can afford. I want to have a property that's got 30 to 40 deer and multiple bucks, so when Flynn's ready to hunt, he can shoot a spike. And I'm like, no, my 5-year-old. I don't want to be that way. I'm like, I want to value this moment with my son shooting a spike. And I don't care. There has to be no repercussions. But if I over-harvest now, he won't enjoy that. So just because we can't rely on them to manage the deer population doesn't mean you can't hear. I actually want to start a QDM group for Northern Wisconsin.
We can have a good talk about that at some point. I got a lot of really good ideas.
Perfect. But I want to work on that. So work with your neighbors. Work with yourself. Understand your property. Don't go out there with 5 guys, boom, 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 and then go, why is there no deer? Yeah. Well, you created that. So don't rely on them to manage the deer herd. You manage your property and your deer herd and do what you think is best to reach your goals. Yeah. I'm done. Wits End Ridge is nothing but a giant sanctuary. I find you on my property. I have a hole. Bring it. But that is a sanctuary for them, for the deer to hide and get to another age class. So
yeah. So I think we got a lot of good things we can talk about next week. But for now, next week we're talking about a Montana hunt recap. So that's what we're doing next week. But for now, it's time to sign off because we're going to go a half hour. We're in 57 minutes because that's how we roll. We are the worst people to do a podcast because we talk forever. Or maybe that makes us good people to do a podcast. I don't know.
We'll find out.
Yeah. So we are going to sign off here. As we always say, you can find us on all of our socials. We got Facebook, we got TikTok, we got Instagram, we got YouTube. We're on Anchor Podcast and Spotify Podcasts. I'm thinking about getting a Twitter lined up just because I think it'd be fun now. Twitter might be fun now. I don't care where people stand politically. It might be fun now. New management.
I'm gonna send a tweet.
You're gonna call it a twit. Great. So find us where you can find us. If you want to talk to us, send us a message on Facebook, comment on a YouTube video, or send us an email at 10pointwhitetails@gmail.com. And I think that about covers it. Find us where you found us. Follow us. Like, share, subscribe. If you want to support us in any way, that's the biggest thing you can do for us right now. If you have a business that would like to sponsor our podcast, we're opening it up to new sponsors at this point. You never know. We might take you. We like to push products. Tacticam, we're talking to you. We've only talked about your products on every podcast since we've started.
I think that's no joke. I have one requirement when it comes to products. It has to be something that we personally use or trust. You ain't gonna buy us. We ain't gonna buy us.
Like MeUndies, I know they did a lot of podcast stuff for a while. I might think about it. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll be back next week. Lessons of the Woods drops every week at 7 p.m. on Friday. Unless something bad happens. Or we're hunting. So, we'll see you guys next time.